This is it, guys. I'm going to put these two machines up against each other, the Challenger MT743 and our John Deere 8360 RT. I'm going to tell you exactly what I like and what I don't like about each tractor, and then I'm going to tell you at the end of this video exactly why the Challenger is still here. Okay, first off, let's go around the outside here and talk a little bit about styling. The way that this Challenger is styled, you know, I like the looks of both tractors, but this thing, I like the styling, the looks of this better from the outside. You know, it's kind of a personal preference whether you like these colors or those colors, but when it comes to the actual styling and the layout of the hood and the way everything looks, especially at night with the lights on, which I know is not important, it's more about function than it is the looks, but the styling on this MT743, I would say, to me, beats out that 8360 by a little bit. The downfall to some of that styling is the fact that when you're inside the tractor, the visibility in this machine is much better. You can see down the sides a lot better, particularly around the hood area. There's not so much busyness going on over here. Also, the fuel tanks, we'll get into that in a bit, but the visibility out the back of this machine is a lot better than it is out the back of that Challenger. Back to the outside and talking about the ride and the track system here. This 8360 RT is not bad. Typically it's pretty smooth, especially going through the fields. When you back it into the shed, if you've got a little bump to get over on some of the concrete, it does hammer pretty good. It's a little bit more raw. The ride is a little bit rougher, but overall it's not bad. However, if you want to compare it to the ride on this 743 Challenger, there's no comparison. This track system, as far as ride goes, is far superior. It's much, much smoother. I was really impressed with how much smoother this system is. When you get in it, the first time you drive it around, you think, yeah, it's pretty smooth, and then you get in the 8360. There is a major noticeable difference between the two. This one here rides much smoother. I did, however, have some issues with this thing in the mud. I know some guys were commenting thinking that I got diesel inside the track because I had spilled some diesel just before that. It was not a diesel issue. The diesel that spilled went down inside, on the inside of the track. Inside here, it didn't go into the track system at all. What the issue was the mud and the half frozen water getting inside the system, and the tractor didn't want to turn because of this friction drive setup, which is the same setup as the John Deere over here. So there isn't a difference. However, in 2 years we have not had that problem with the Deere. I can't say that it's a specific issue with the Challenger versus the Deere, that anything is different, because we didn't have this machine specifically in those conditions, but I did have that problem some with this machine. When it comes to the engine, I will say a couple of things. Number one, this machine is noisier than this machine. This engine here is a lot quieter, especially and particularly inside the cab. I'm not sure if that's actually an issue with the cab being quieter or if the engine is that much quieter, but when they are running side by side, you can have a normal conversation standing right next to this engine, and it's almost like it's almost no louder than my pickup truck, versus this one over here is a little bit louder. It's not bad. I'm not saying that this engine is loud. I'm just saying that this one over here is quieter. However, this one over here, we struggled when we got a loaded grain cart. It didn't seem to have the low end torque that this one has. When this one needs power and you've got a full grain cart behind it and you really need to pull up a hill with this thing and it calls for some horsepower, this one kicks in and gives it horsepower. This one struggles a little bit. I don't know exactly why that is, because when you look at the horsepower ratings on these two, when you compare them apples to apples, I'm told that they're actually only 4 horsepower apart. Granted, this one is supposed to be 430 engine horsepower. That one is supposed to be 360 engine horsepower, but when you use the same rating, they actually come out to almost identical. So I'm not sure why exactly that is. We did have some specialists from AGCO come out here and help us set the computer on this to make sure that everything was set correctly. Ziegler came out, which is the dealer we've worked with. This is Ziegler's tractor. They are the dealer in Minnesota for these machines. So this is going to be a nice machine for somebody. And they were out, they helped us out, made sure we were getting everything out of it and all the settings were correct. We just never found the bottom end torque that John Deere machine has. When it comes to lighting, the lighting on both machines is good. The lighting on this Deere we never struggle with, we never have any issues with it. It has adequate lighting. However, I will say that the lighting on the Challenger is slightly superior. Now that's slightly, it's nothing that would ever make any difference when we were actually looking towards purchasing one or the other, but the lighting is a little bit better on this machine. One of the things particularly that they did that I think is cool is they offset this light here and this light here so that these four lights kind of crisscross each other, and you end up eliminating a lot of the shadows out in front of you when it comes to the exhaust system. You eliminate some of the shadows inside the windows when you're in the cab at night. It's really a unique idea that seems like such a simple fix, and I think that helps a fair amount. Just a quick walk around here on some of the bells and whistles on this machine while I'm still standing outside. This has an automatic reverser fan that can be set on the computer inside the cab. I have it set so that every 15 minutes it will reverse for 15 seconds and blow the chaff off the screen here. That way the chaff doesn't get built up and built up and built up and never come off of there. It actually reverses and blows that chaff off. Over here, the steps actually have an automatic cylinder on them, so that once you get moving, that actuator cylinder kicks in and folds the step up so that you're not going to hook the steps on anything. That also allows it to come closer to the ground. You can see it actually runs pretty close to the ground there, and then it folds up out of the way so you don't have issues. Once you stop or open the door, that cylinder will open up those steps again so that you're free to climb down. Just kind of another cool feature. I did at times, however, find that a little bit annoying because there were times when it didn't want to go down. So I had to go back in the cab, push the park button to get that to go down. I never did ask for an explanation as to what I was doing wrong. But I'm sure there's a setting, there's something that I just didn't know and I didn't really look into because it wasn't a big enough of an issue for me to really care about figuring out what was going on, but that was a slight annoyance a few times. As far as the fuel tanks go up here, as I was mentioning before, I like the styling. I think they look fine. However, because of the styling on that machine, it greatly reduces the visibility compared to this machine. On those fuel tanks, you're actually able to walk across the top here to wash your windows or get to the roof or whatever you need to do up there, which is really, really handy. But you can't see anything compared to this machine, particularly when you got to back up to an implement and hook this machine up. You can't see the drawbar. It's really, really difficult to see that hitch pin or the drawbar, the cylinders, whatever you're trying to hook up or get to in the back, you can't see it on that machine. This machine, you can see everything down here clearly. It's wide open. And not to mention that, but you can see the tops of the tracks. You can see everything moving on the back of this machine. When it comes to visibility, this machine is far superior, especially out the back. We've got this one hooked up to the planter right now, but looking at the back here, you can see how everything is nice and wide open. It's easy to see, it's easy to get to. You can stand right in here to get to anything. There's no issues trying to fumble around and squeeze into any tight places. This machine here is not bad. You can still get into anything, but it is more cowled up, a little bit more clustered up. It's a little bit more difficult to reach some of the controls and see exactly what you're doing. It's still clean looking. It's not a problem. It didn't bother us. It's really just something that I've noticed. As long as you don't have problems, you don't need to get to anything mechanical. Neither one of them are a problem, but I would prefer the back end of this machine over the back end of this one. All right, let's climb up inside the cabs of these things and I'll show you what I do and don't like. First off, I want to show you the visibility. This machine here has a large sort of control center here. Easy to look at, easy to control, but it does sort of fit with the bigger hood, which makes the visibility a little more poor. You can see how the steps and everything sort of covers up the tracks, and there just isn't as much visibility out the front. When it comes to the back, look at the size of these fuel tanks and the way that you can't really see the hitch pin there. I struggled with that a lot trying to hook up the implements, especially compared to this John Deere where you can see so much better out the back. You can see on the camera there the drawbar is easily visible. So the visibility in this machine from every direction, but particularly out the back, this machine wins out clearly when it comes to visibility. You can see the hood is narrow. There's no controls up here blocking your spot. There's actually, for a really tall guy like me, there's a lot more room with your knees because you don't have the interference with everything going on up here. I had a lot of people tell me that I would really love the CVT transmission on that Challenger. I did like it. It's a nice transmission. However, I'm used to the IVT transmission in this tractor. If I had to choose one, I would choose this IVT. To me, it seems a little bit less complicated. There definitely isn't as many different functions with it, but I never have to worry about switching between functions. I find what I want, I use it the way it is, and I like the way this transmission works. This transmission here, you can change it so many different ways on the computer, which I'll get into in a minute here, but we're always sort of toggling back and forth between the joystick mode and the pedal mode. Each one has their specific functions where they work really well. I prefer the pedal mode while running grain cart, especially when I'm dumping a truck, but that one works really well too if you just ride the brake a little bit and let it roll. We did have issues, quite a bit of issues, trying to figure out exactly how to run this joystick and trying to teach everybody how to run that. The one thing I really don't like is the setting here on the side for the sensitivity. It works great when you're going forward, it's a nice idea, but something needs to be changed so that it's not always so sensitive when you slow down. If you set the sensitivity to full high, it takes off quick, it goes quick just like you want it to on a grain cart because you're always kind of in a hurry. But if you leave it on that high setting and you pull up to the truck and you pull back on the stick to slow down, it darn near throws you out into the hood. So you're constantly fidgeting with this thing, and when you forget it, you just about end up with a concussion against the windshield. So they've got to change something with the sensitivity of the joystick when you pull it back. That was a big part of the reason that I really liked this pedal mode. If I can figure out how to get down there. Anyway, see that? Pedal mode works really nice for certain things, but you've got to adjust it on the button over here. And a lot of the times you forget which mode you're in, and each mode sort of has its own thing that it works good for. I don't like driving down the road in pedal mode. I prefer the joystick for that, but in the field running grain cart, that pedal mode is pretty nice. Moving on to the buttons over here, there's not a ton of them to get confused with. There is a lot going on this screen. This screen here was half my issues with this tractor. There's so much you can do inside here, and it's set up so differently than that tractor that I was constantly confused with this thing, trying to get the settings all set up. It's got a lot of really, really nice bells and whistles, but it does take some time to learn. I'm not going to complain about it and say that it would prevent me from buying the tractor, but I would choose that system. That is probably just because that's the system that I know, that's the system I've worked with for 10 years. To me, this one was difficult to grasp at certain times. Again, I think that's just me. I think if you had spent a lot of time in a Challenger and you tried to get on that system, you'd probably be just as confused. If you watch my past videos, you know that we ended up putting a Reichart system in here so that we could run the John Deere screen. That helped. That was nice, especially for running the ripper. I don't know how it would work with running the deep bander or the planter, exactly what those functions would look like, because I didn't get experience with that. But I think it would work pretty well. I don't think there'd be a problem. That Reichart system was a pretty simple plug-in deal, and all of a sudden we had John Deere controls inside this Challenger. You know, if it's something you're looking at, look into that, check into Reichart. If you're working with Ziegler here in Minnesota, talk to them about it. They'll happily work with you to set you up with something like that. This end go button function is really, really cool. A lot of you would love that end go button. I know I did when I had it set up for certain things, but with that other system in here running the John Deere screen, we did have issues with certain things working on those buttons and certain things not. It sounds like they've got that fixed now to where everything will follow through onto the end go buttons on the joystick on here. That would be a big help. So that is going to be a big improvement for those of you wondering about that. Heating and cooling controls and fan controls on this machine are right here. I don't have a problem with where the heating and cooling control buttons and the functions, where they're at in that machine. They're right here in this machine. What I wanted to mention on those was that on this machine, I never have an issue trying to get everything set and get the climate in here the way that I want it. I did have a lot of issues in that machine trying to keep the fan steady and the temperature steady. It seemed like I struggled. I was always too hot or too cold, going back and forth. Sometimes the fan would want to kick in on auto and go wide open when I'd switch it to defrost, and I didn't want that. So it was more difficult to keep a consistent, comfortable temperature inside the cab on that machine, and I never did figure out exactly why that was. So when it comes to controlling the climate inside the tractor, I would definitely say that the John Deere has got a leg up on that. Now, I mentioned before that inside the cabs, that Challenger machine over there is quieter when it comes to engine noise. The downfall of that machine is the terrible hydraulic whine when you turn with it. You can always hear turning, no matter what direction, no matter how tight you turn, you can hear the hydraulic pump whining pretty loudly in that, pretty considerable. It does actually get annoying if you're doing a lot of turning. If you're running long rounds and you're just turning on the ends, running the ripper, it's not something that would stop me from buying the better tractor if I believe that was the better tractor. It's just, it's definitely noticeable. It's something that stands out to me. The whine on that machine is bad. This machine here, you don't even hear it at all. There is no noticeable difference when you turn. There's no extra sound coming from this machine. So when it comes to that, this John Deere, hands down, by far, has got that beat when it comes to that. However, I've mentioned many times that the interior and the cab inside this Challenger is really, really quiet when it comes to engine noise. If I had to pick one of these tractors to sit in for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, I would probably choose this Challenger, to be honest with you guys. It's quieter and it's smoother, but I'm not going to complain about that John Deere. If you want me to sit in that for 100 hours a week, I would never complain about that. Both machines are nice, both ride good, both are fairly quiet, but this one does beat in that category by a slight margin. As I walk out here, I wanted to point out one thing. This is so simple and it doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you're working in muddy conditions and you're climbing in and out of this cab with muddy boots, this wide open edge here to scrape your boots on and let the mud fall through is really, really cool, especially compared to this one here where you've got some holes to work with. You can scrape your boots here, but the mud sort of builds up here. You don't get nearly as good of a scraping. It seems like such a simple non-point that I wouldn't even need to point out, but it mattered. Both Dad and I really, really liked this. It's nice, it's cool. When you need it, you need it. When your boots are muddy, this was awesome. I guess that means that Challenger wins in the mud scraping category. When it comes to efficiency, we didn't exactly get a super close apples to apples test. What I can tell you is that both of them on the grain cart hardly burn any diesel at all because you're idling half the time. So the diesel burn on either one of them was not bad. When you're running the ripper, we actually found that Challenger seemed to burn almost as much DEF as it did diesel. That's of course an exaggeration, but we were putting a lot of DEF in that machine when we were running the ripper behind it. The harder you pull that machine, I got the wrong hat on. The harder you pull that machine, the more of a difference it made on the DEF burn. Now this machine here doesn't have DEF, so we never had to worry about it with this machine. I'm positive that the 2018s do. I couldn't tell you how they compare, but again, if I go back and say on a grain cart on this machine, I think we put in DEF once or twice. It wasn't a big deal on this machine, but once we moved it to the ripper, it definitely burned a lot more DEF. Not a big deal, but it did become a little bit annoying when we were trying to hurry at the end there and we had to stop every few hours to put 5 gallons of DEF in it. It was just something we weren't used to because none of our Deere machines actually have DEF. We don't own any machines that have DEF on them at this point. When it comes to service in the field and when you're busy in the field, you have an issue, you need a dealer to come out, you got a question. The Ziegler guys were great. They worked with us awesome. Every time I had a question on this, they had someone available to me. Everybody gave me their card. I stuck it in the arm console. I was in contact with everybody. The service was good. The Ziegler dealers, the closest one is about an hour from here. So they are farther away than our Midwest Machinery dealer, who is about 9 miles down the road. But I will say that Ziegler, when it mattered or when it didn't matter, anytime we needed them to show up, they were there. They answered the phone. Somebody showed up or somebody called back and helped us. I did not have any issues with service on this machine. But I've said it many, many times, and I'm going to reiterate it now. A huge part of the reason that we have so much John Deere equipment is because of our local dealer. Midwest Machinery is 9 miles down the road. When we call them and we have an issue with something, they are on it. And we've worked with them for 10 or 15 years that way. They're on it right away. They send somebody out. They get it fixed. If we have an issue, we're in a hurry. Somebody's around. Somebody makes the phone calls. They make it happen. The service for Midwest Machinery and John Deere has been really, really good. And that is a huge part of the reason that we run John Deere equipment. So I'm not going to give the win to either one of them when it comes to service with the dealer or the company, because I just don't feel like I've got enough experience with Ziegler and AGCO yet to say which one is better. Both of them have been great for us. Both of them provide really good service. I will say that I would not hesitate for a second to work with Ziegler or AGCO, because in the experience that I do have with them, they've been good. I'm not afraid to continue working with John Deere and Midwest Machinery either, obviously. So that is my quick rundown to you guys of what I do and don't like about each machine here, my thoughts on them, how I feel. All in all, both tractors, awesome tractors. I would not hesitate to own either one of these. I like them both. But now, a lot of you want to know the truth about what's going on with this Challenger. Here's the truth, guys. I promised myself I wouldn't cry. That was a Wayne's World reference. The truth is, everybody's busy. We got to the end of the season. We ran this thing down as much as we could. We enjoyed it. We got the experience with it. We parked it in our shed, and when we got around to cleaning things, it was still here, so we washed it up for those guys. And Ziegler is going to come pick this thing up today, take it back. They will have it for sale, I would assume. So this is going to make a nice tractor for somebody. Right now, in our operation, this is not a purchase that we're interested in making at this time because we've got that tractor over there. We did not trade the 8360 or the 8260 or the 6410 or the 9650 or any of those random numbers for this tractor. This tractor is still owned by Ziegler. I'm going to miss it. I like this tractor, but that's the truth behind it. We don't own it. It's just been here kind of nestled in our shed. It wasn't in our way. I told Ziegler, you know, it's not in our way. We're not in a hurry. You don't need to come get it tomorrow, but they are going to come out and get it today, so the Challenger will be gone.